Justin, man, thank you so much for coming on the show here today. Really excited to have you on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Mike, first I want to thank you for having me on.
Of course.
This is a long time coming, and
Yes.
it was really it took a while to get us together, but I'm really glad to do it.
Yeah.
And you don't know this, but actually back in 2014 and 2015, I actually was driving 180 miles a day for work.
Oh
So I
my
spent
gosh.
a lot of time in the car for about a little over 3 years.
Yeah.
And I must have listened to your podcast with Mike Ron Karate, Pat Davidson,
Yes,
and
those
Bill
were some
Hartman,
OGs.
the
Yes.
OGs. Like I must have
Yes.
listened to them 50 plus times. So that was a really formative period in my coaching, and that kind of directed me into a lot of my learning and education. So I appreciate that, and this is a really cool kind of full circle moment for
Yeah,
me.
that's
So,
awesome, man.
yeah,
That's
man.
awesome.
So a little bit about me. My name is Justin Moore. I am the director of sports performance at a small facility called Bolt Fitness and Performance in Chester, New Jersey. We work with all athletes of all ages and all abilities, all sporting backgrounds. We work with adults in both a small group setting as well as a semi-private setting. And then on top of that, I'm also the director of education and continuing coach development there. Been doing this for about 11 years now. So we just passed the 10-year mark last year.
Yeah,
So a little over 11 years.
congrats.
Thank you, man. And then I also, in terms of my daily life, I have a wife and a dog. We live in Parsippany, New Jersey. So we're in northern New Jersey, not far from Chester, where the facility is located. And I enjoy a really good cup of coffee. So
I love it.
that's a little about me.
I love it, man. Well, I don't want to get too far down this path, but I am going to apologize for the Mike Ron Karate episode. I don't know if you remember, but back then he was with the Hawks and they were literally like reconstructing the facility. And so, like, legitimately, they are sawing stuff in the background. Like, it's like the worst audio ever. So we were just talking before the show. That's why I use Riverside. I can't fix saws in the background. But the awesome thing about those episodes, it's crazy. I still remember that. That was what, 2016, 2017. Yeah. It's a long time. But Mike comes on, and after the show, he's like, that was good, but I can do better. So what? I can't imagine no, I can do better. He's like, I want to go deeper and I want to actually share what we're doing. Because, I mean, sometimes at the highest levels, there's this, we've got the secret sauce.
Yep.
We're not going to share what we're doing. And so for Ronk to say, no, I want to go deeper. And that was really cool, man. So I'm glad you took value from those. Yeah.
I think that's what I really resonated with. Like just that second episode that came back and he shared so much. It was like, first of all, it's awesome for him to share that information, but yes. it springboarded and inspired so much of my learning and so much of the direction that I went into after that. So that was really cool and always stuck with me.
That's awesome, man. And shout out to Ronk, dude. He is one of those guys. He's like, he's in the game, but he's out of like the game. He's not on social. He's not doing all that. But man, amazing practitioner and amazing human. So shout out to him. Man, I would love to also hear just kind of how you got started in all this. So like, what's the origin story? How did you get started in training? I would love to hear, I know maybe you don't want to share it, but the injury history, because you've been through the ringer. Yeah. And I didn't really know about that. So I would love to just hear kind of how you got started in this space.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I was a decent athlete. I played high school football and I played college football at the Division III level. But the big thing was that I was always a guy who was willing to work harder and commit to like grinding more than other people to outweigh my lack of talent in some respects, right?
Yeah.
But I got to school and I was playing Division III football and I ended up tearing my ACL 3 times in 3 consecutive years. So right knee torn up. I was actually coming off a shoulder labrum surgery as well. So basically 4 surgeries, 3 years. And along the way, I kind of found the weight room as a way to not only transform my body composition and the way that I felt about myself physically, but also as a way to get back on the field and improve my performance. And I fell in love with that process through the rehab and the process of coming back from all of these injuries. And I also remember distinctly that my my learning track, my education track was in communications, and moving towards like reporting, writing, things of that nature.
Right.
And I did an internship at the Essex County Prosecutor's Office in North Jersey, and I basically sat in a courtroom all day, was
Mm-hmm.
writing notes, and was wearing a suit and tie. And I remember thinking to myself, "This is not it. This is not what I want to do." So I
Yep.
knew kind of then like that wasn't for me. And at that time, I had found this passion in the gym, in the weight room. And so through my own kind of learning, through my own training, through the rehabilitation process, I was able to come back after those 3 surgeries, and was able to play at an all-conference level.
That's
And was able
awesome.
to finish out my eligibility and get my master's degree, which was incredible. And I really found a passion in wanting to make sure that athletes learned from the things that I didn't have access to, right?
Yes.
That I could help athletes in a way that I was never helped, and I could help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I maybe ran into and maybe never get there to where you've had, at this point, I've had 7 surgeries.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
and I actively tore meniscus. So like a lot of, time beating up my body playing offensive and defensive line over the years. But yeah, I really wanted to help in that regard. And so from there, I got an internship with Seton Hall University. I don't have an education in this and that, like I didn't go to school for kinesiology. I didn't go to school for any sort of sports science. But I went to Seton Hall, worked with all of their sports performance programs, and then was just looking for a way to get more experience one day, and
Yeah.
was scrolling through the NSCA website looking for an internship. Found a listing for a place called Parabolic Performance and Rehab, which ended
Mm.
up being my first internship, my first job, and I parlayed
Yeah.
that into a full-time gig for a little over 8 years.
Yeah.
And actually, that's where I met my wife. That's where I met all the people I work with now.
That's
It
cool.
was it was a really cool experience, and along that way, like that's how I got into coaching. And then once I got there, I got exposed to a lot of really forward thinking and great people, and in an environment that forced me to learn and grow and step outside of my background, which was Olympic lifting, powerlifting, and football, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like I had to understand more about human anatomy and capacity development and speed and sports performance and like the holistic picture of things. And I really just dove in and I learned everything I possibly could during that period. And then I turned that into a role where I was a full-time coach. I was the head of our combine training program at that facility. I ended up being the director of education and continuing development at that facility. And now that's kind of, moved me to where I am now. So that's how it happened.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I did this master class last week, and one of the things that I talk about is if you really like dive into strength culture and you look at where, especially at like say the Division 1 level, right, like collegiate S&C, basically it all comes from 3 pillars, right? Either you're a bodybuilding program, you're a powerlifting program, or you're an Olympic lifting program,
Yep.
right? And it's kind of like the analogy I used was like UFC. When the UFC started, and I'm not like the biggest UFC fan, but like there's strikers, there's wrestlers, there's BJJ, there's like all these sects, and SECTS, in case you're wondering what I just said. But there's all these different like divisions, right? And now you're just MMA people, right? They're just MMA fighters, and I think that's where our industry is evolving to. There were speed people, there were strength people. Now it's like, no, man, we're just trying to be great physical preparation coaches. And so I think that's
100%.
what's been really cool to see is, like I come from powerlifting. You come from Olympic lifting and powerlifting. Ryan Patrick, who I had on a while back, he was a powerlifter and a strongman. Now we're all like trying to put all these pieces together. But what's going to be really cool is like that next generation
Yes.
where they don't associate it with it's just the weight room or just the track. It's no, we're just trying to make better athletes. And that's going to be pretty
100%.
cool.
Couldn't agree more. That's very well put.
So one of the things I would love to talk to you about, because I kind of got a feel for, what you do in your day to day. I would love to hear like your overarching philosophy on developing athletes, because you've got like a lot of different pieces to your background. You've been around a lot of high level people. So when you explain to somebody, hey, here's my philosophy, how would you describe that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, I think it's important to coach the person that's in front of you. And I
Yep.
think this is something that a lot of young coaches I'm seeing are missing to a certain degree. I think we're seeing a lot of people who are doing a great job of learning the X's and O's of training, who are developing their model, who want to understand advanced biomechanics and can write the best program. But if you're not able to speak to the individual in front of you, to their goals, their desires, and what they want, you're going to fail. and
Yes.
it's not going to work out as a relationship, and they're not going to see the progress they want. And I'll give you an example. I just had a young athlete the other day. He's like 12, 13 years old. He's like just coming into his own. And I was talking to him and I was asking, like, hey, like, what do you want to do in this next program? What's your goal? Like, what do we want to get better at?
Right.
And he's like, well, I want to get stronger. I was like, oh, cool, awesome. So tell me a little bit more about that. What does that mean to you, right? What does strength mean
Yep.
to you? And he kind of paused. So I started like asking a little bit more. I was like, hey, in sports, is there somewhere that you want to feel stronger? Do you feel like you want to be more physical, or you want to run faster, jump higher, whatever it was? And he still wasn't sure. I was like, is it just that you want to lift more weight? And he's like, yeah, that one. He's like, I like bench
Yeah.
pressing. I want to bench press more.
Oh,
And like,
okay.
who am I to tell you that that's not what you want, right? Like, if that's what you
Absolutely.
want, that's what I'm there to deliver, especially in the private sector. So I
For
think we
sure.
have to get back to relating to the individual's goals and really understanding that person first and
I love
foremost.
that. Yeah.
Now, that being said, in terms of my model of athletic development, right, if I'm looking at an overarching theme, I want to develop a robust and adaptable mover who has as many movement solutions available to them as possible, is able to problem solve through movement, and is able to withstand and recover from the stressors of sport performance. That is what I'm trying to develop holistically. And
Yeah.
so my model for doing that in terms of any athletic endeavor or any task or any goal that an athlete has is based on 5 buckets. And I have stolen this absolutely from Ty Terrell, and I have adapted it over time to kind of make it a little bit more my own. But I give credit to him because he really opened my eyes when he shared this information. And I thought it was great. So bucket number 1 is position. Can you get into position to either accomplish the task efficiently and effectively, right? Can you capture the shapes? Can your joints get into the range of motion necessary to express that movement? Because your body, you cannot move in a way that your body will not allow. If you
Yeah.
can't get into that position, regardless of the circumstance, you won't be able to get into it at high force, high velocity, etc. Right?
For sure.
So that's number 1. Number 2 is force production. We know that force is the language of movement, right? I need to produce a force in order to move my body through space, right? And we know that impulse, which is force applied over time, is going to lead to changes in velocity, right? Which is how we move through space. So I need to be able to produce high mass specific forces, and then I need to do it in varying time constraints based on different tasks, right?
Yep.
So I look at things like slow and fast stretch shortening cycle behaviors, irrespective of vector, right? So I want to see how well can this athlete produce force with a slower stretch shortening cycle kind of strategy, and then
Yep.
how well can they produce force when there is a high time constraint placed on them, and there's a much shorter period of time in which to apply that force. Okay,
Yep.
and so then number 3 is going to be motor control. And for me, this is all about orientation of force application. So we know that it's not necessarily the case that more force in athletic movements, especially, is going to lead to better outcomes, right? We know from linear acceleration and change of direction research, as well as max velocity and a number of other things, that the way that I apply force and the direction that I apply force is going to determine to a far greater degree than magnitude alone the individual's output. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's, can I increase and decrease momentum efficiently and effectively by applying force to the ground in the right direction relative to my body in order to accomplish that task? And
Yep.
so a lot of times we're talking about ratio of forces here, right? High horizontally directed forces. And so in this way, I look at multi-directional speed and every movement that we utilize in sport as a skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're always trying to develop the skill of force application in a given context. So could be lateral acceleration, change of direction, linear acceleration, some sort of hip turn or retreating movement. How well can you apply force in that context in the right direction in order to move yourself through space or decelerate and decrease momentum? And then the last 2 are perceptual motor capabilities. So
Mm.
now, can I take my movement capabilities and apply them when I'm not only influencing, but reacting to a live external stimuli, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
can I do it in context? Because we all have seen athletes who, they're great movers when you give them all the time in the world to set up and hit the
Yeah. Yeah.
perfect shapes, right? But as soon as you put them interacting with a live opponent and a much greater task constraint where they have to now read and simply react without thinking too much, and now all of a sudden they can't move as effectively. So
Yep.
I always want to challenge athletes, and it's not ever going to be specific to the sport context in my area, right? But I can still use different games and different interactive elements to challenge their ability to read a live opponent and influence the behavior of a live opponent through their movement. And I think that's critical as well. And
Yep.
then lastly is capacity. And these aren't necessarily in like a straight order. They're all interacting at all times.
Sure.
But I want to build a big gas tank, right? I want an
Yep.
athlete who can now repeat high quality efforts where motor control is maintained under fatigue, where they can recover in between bouts or in between high intensity outputs, and they can maintain those outputs over time. Because it's great if you can hit the perfect shapes, the perfect position, produce high forces in the first quarter. But if you
Yep.
can't do that in the third and fourth quarter, not only is your performance going to suffer, but now there's a greater cost to training. There's a greater
Absolutely.
cost to performance, and you can't recover as well. So I think capacity is one when it comes to multi-directional speed, when it comes to athletic performance, that we sometimes underappreciate the value of and how important that is, because maybe you can't hit the perfect positions, you can't hit the perfect shapes, but you're robust because you are able to recover and maintain the quality of your outputs over a longer period of time. And I think that's incredibly important as well.
Dude, that was such a thorough answer. One of the athletes I always prop up when we start talking about capacity is LeBron James. Because if you look at LeBron James and you look at some of the positions that he has and some of the orientations, I mean, we've talked about this right knee since 2007, I think, and it's going to break down. Look, dude, that guy's engine is ridiculous.
Insane.
When you think about the size of his body, being able to fuel that much muscle mass, right, for 40 minutes a game, 100 games a year. I mean, there was a 10-year stretch where he was going to the finals every year. So the fact that he's been as injury resistant as he has been over 20 plus years, I think part of that has to be put back on that capacity bucket.
Totally.
Right? Like his capacity gives him this range and this buffer zone to where, hey, look, man, maybe he doesn't move perfectly, but he's got enough adaptability in his system and he's got enough capacity where he's not going to break down where a lot of other people probably would.
It gives you a greater bandwidth through which to operate, right? You have a bigger, wider scope and a bigger room for error to operate within, right? And then even better, you can recover faster from that, right? And I think that's just so huge, and we don't appreciate that enough sometimes.
Agreed. Okay, so I think of all the questions I have, this is the one I'm most excited about, right? Because you and I think at our core, we are biomechanics nerds, right? We're physiology nerds. Like I see you and you're reading, the papers every morning, and I'm driving around in my car listening to podcasts, and like that's kind of how we're wired. But I think there's something that a lot of people are missing in this day and age, right? There's like the internet expert that's super focused on perfect movement and achieving the ultimate shape. Oh, if they can't do this, they don't deserve to do that. But you and I both also work in the private sector and we're in the real world, right? And so, hey man, just because little Johnny can't achieve this perfect shape doesn't mean he doesn't get to train. So how do you find that balance? Because I think this is something a lot of people need to hear. How do you find that balance between what perfect movement is, right? You know how it should look.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, how do you not get lost in that sauce of perfect movement and go about actually developing athletes?
Yeah, man, this is such a good question. And I think it's why it's so important to have that holistic model first and foremost to work off of. I would start by saying the first thing is that we always want to remember that there is no perfect movement, right? And so when we think of that as there's no truly perfect movement, like every athlete will have their own idiosyncratic elements to their movement, and there will always be things and outliers, right, that still move really efficiently and effectively outside of what we would think of as perfect, right? So that's number one. And then number two is I don't coach to a perfect movement model. I coach to stable attractor elements of movement, right? Things that are based on first principles that are invariant. Like I don't care who you are, you still have to move with the laws of physics governing how you go, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And there are certain elements of every movement that we can say, regardless of who you are or what sport you play or what your background is, we want to see this because we know that this is an element of efficient and effective movement. And that is what we coach to. And so that frees us up to still have a lot of individual elements to the movement, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And then I ask myself a series of questions, right? So first, is this limitation or this perceived restriction in the ability to access a shape or a position either leading to pain directly, or is it potentially setting them up for serious injury, right? We know that
Sure.
there's a stress allocation element to this where there's a lot of stress being put in one place, and we know that that's not really a sustainable strategy. Okay.
Yep.
Number two, is this limitation in access to shape or range of motion leading to a direct performance limitation, right?
Yep.
And if that's the limiting factor, then we definitely want to intervene. And then finally, is that inability to access that position limiting their ability to recover from training, right? Is
Hmm.
there leading to a thing where they're sore for days after, or they can't bounce back as well? If any of those three questions are yes, then that's something we want to maybe intervene on or
Yep.
refer out to physical therapy. And we're lucky enough that we have in-house physical therapy through AMP Performance and Rehab as well. So I can just refer them over to there and
That's
have a
awesome.
conversation. So I'll give you two examples of where that happened recently. And it was really relevant to actually dive in a little bit deeper. So on one hand, had a soccer player yesterday, All-American, really good athlete, really fast and explosive, dislocated his shoulder about 6 weeks ago, has been going through the PT process and continuing to train with us along the way. And he was saying, man, I'm feeling really good. Like I'm right there. I feel like I'm right around the corner from being able to go full. But like when I sprint or accelerate and my arm has to go back, I get this like pain in the front of my shoulder. And
Yep.
he's like, it just feels so tight and PT's always working on it. But like I just can't really let it rip at this point because as soon as I go too far back too fast, it hurts. So I'm like, okay, let's take a look at that. So I just had him lay on the ground in between his sets. We were doing some power work, and I just checked his shoulder IR, and he
Yeah.
had maybe like 15 degrees at most of shoulder IR.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, we're just going to hit one activity, supine hook lying with a kind of D2 flexion. We're going
Yeah.
to get your left back on the ground, get some air in your right chest wall. We did one set of about 6 breaths. Had him check his IR. He's up to 75 or 80 degrees. Now, more
Yep.
importantly, I had him stand up, and I'm like, hey, don't be crazy, but give me a few like arm swings. Pick up the speed as you go and
Yeah.
really let your arms rip. And he's like, oh, it feels a lot better. Like I don't feel anything in the front of my shoulder. And I
Yep.
was just like, hey, so like this is something that I'm going to give you a little bit of homework on. And I want you to work on this on your own to make
Yep.
sure you have access to that range, because I think your ability to get into that shoulder extension and IR position as you go behind your body, you free that up, and all of a sudden that shoulder is not going to be as irritated, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
that's one, right? And then number two is I'm working with a relatively high level baseball player, and he's trying to work on his steel start. And we time lateral start linear accelerations every week. Fridays, we have fast Fridays at the gym. Because of some constraints, I use that lateral start 10 as my kind of timing.
Yeah.
And I have him do both sides. So he was showing a consistent like 0.05 to 0.07 difference. And he was slower on the side that he needs to run the bases for,
Right.
and he
Yeah.
needs to steal for it. So he's like, man, like I got showcases coming up. Like I got to be better going off this direction.
Right.
So we're watching the videos back, and we're kind of looking and breaking things down. And he's just not comfortable unweighting his right side, putting force down into his left side, and fueling the turn, right?
Yep.
He doesn't project as well off his left leg. He's not finishing the turn as well. And it's consistent in his limitation. So we worked with him and PT, and we started getting him back on the left a little bit more, unweighting that right side, teaching him to apply force through his left medial heel all the way down, and
Yep.
then put him right back in and applied it in terms of like the training stimulus.
Yep.
And so now his decrement, his difference is down to like 0.02, 0.03,
That's
and
cool.
both numbers have gone up. So now
Yeah,
like we
that's
raised
cool.
the ceiling on both sides, right?
Yeah.
And that was a situation where like more strength, more power wasn't going to help him get where he wants. And we were already training the skill. So
Yep.
it's like we have to intervene now and appreciate that position and strategy in terms of force application might be a limiter here, right? And so
Mhm.
those are two examples. But then I need to also appreciate that maybe if I step back, that things like force production, right? Things like motor skill, things like perceptual motor capabilities, all these other elements are at play. So maybe it's not a positional limitation, right? Maybe it's a young kid who simply just needs to improve their strength, right?
Yeah.
They have to
Absolutely.
improve their mass specific strength.
Yep.
And at the same time, I know that I want to train all of those buckets in
Thank
a
you.
developing,
Yes.
well-rounded athlete.
Thank
So like
you.
we can appreciate position, we can appreciate full range of motion, we can appreciate all of those buckets while still getting a training effect and not putting people on their back or not doing those things. So I
Yeah.
want to give a few strategies that I use to do that. So strategy
Yeah.
number one is simply managing the position of the load to manage the individual center of gravity, right?
Thank you.
So
Yep.
we might put a load anterior, right? Use a
Yep.
goblet. We might use a safety bar where we can shift the center of mass a little bit higher and a little bit more anterior than we would with a barbell, right?
Yep.
And then we can also do some asymmetrical things. So we can have somebody hold contralateral or ipsilateral. We can change the position of the load to get the output we want. So for example, that kid who we're working with the steel star, right? We need to get him back on the left a little bit. So
Yep.
as soon as we put a goblet heavy enough in front of him and had him do a front foot elevated split squat, gave him a heel heavy cue. Hey, I need you to sink straight down in this heel. And I
Yep.
need to make sure that you're not falling forward over the edge of the cliff. All of a sudden now he's like, oh man, I feel my left heel. I feel my left abs. And we can teach him to apply force under his center of gravity through his medial heel. And we're
Yep.
training the whole time, right? And
Absolutely.
this is in his
Absolutely.
accessory work.
Yep.
So I think that's super important. And then number two is I would say I like to use power work and I like to use med ball work to drive a lot of these outputs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll use a lot of shot put rotational med ball throws to teach athletes to exit the cut or redirect momentum out of the cut and apply force through their medial heel. So same individual, now we finished our speed work, but now we're going right into our power tier, and I'm going to have you apply pressure through your medial heel. And instead of thinking about this as your baseball swing, I want to see you actually translate your body. I want you to imagine you're about to run through the wall as you follow through on this shot put throw.
Yep.
And now I can get him feeling how to move his center of mass off that left leg by applying force to the ground. And so that's another strategy. Strategy three would be coaching and cueing. So just one recently that I've been thinking about, if I'm training linear acceleration and I want to make sure that the athlete is finishing their push,
Yep.
instead of saying something like strike the ground, right, which is a cue we use often, right, punch the
Sure.
ground, strike the ground, saying I want you to push through the ground. I want you to drive through the ground. So now I'm not stopping my thought process at the ground. I'm pushing long through that. I'm encouraging more time spent and greater projection, right?
Yep.
So I can use simple coaching cues to drive different positions and outputs just through the language that I use.
Yep.
And then another one that I'm going to steal from Stu McMillan I heard recently that I loved, especially for a guy like me who likes to get very grounded and like squished.
Yes.
He was saying, I want you to imagine there's a little man on the ceiling, and that little man has a hook that he's tied to your head. And he's holding you up as tall as he possibly can throughout this whole drill. I want you to feel like you're long and getting pulled up through the ceiling. And I thought that was just such a great way to take some of our athletes, especially I'm thinking like hockey players, spend a lot of time down at the ground, right? Tilted forward, anteriorly tilted. I want to get them tall and feel what it's like to actually be bouncy and come off the ground. And so now we've just changed the whole vertical dimension of that individual by cueing them, right? And then the last two would be strategy number four is using constraints and different drills with our kind of multi-directional speed work to drive the output I want. So I can create shorter spaces or bigger spaces simply by changing the constraints of the distances the athletes are going to drive different outputs, right? If I want more time on the ground, more force application and greater abduction and external rotation during like a lateral accel, I'm going to force them to push into a bigger space, right? If I want quicker changes of direction and smaller redirections of momentum, I'm going to have them operate in shorter spaces and higher time constraints, right? And then the last one is, like we've talked about a little bit before in some of the examples, tying in positional control drills right back into the context of the activity we're doing. So, for example, I have a figure skater I've worked with. She's actually my longest tenured client. One of my favorite people in the world. Shout out Imogene if she ever listens to this.
There you go.
She's the best. So she's been working with me for I think about 8 years now, which is pretty crazy to think about. And she gets stuck on her right side in a big way. Like figure skating since she was like 2 or 3 years old. Everything is spinning right really hard. But she needs to get off that right side to perform some of the triple triples she wants to do in her program. And so she's identified like, hey, I feel great when I can pop off this right side really well. And I'm feeling kind of buried there right now. And then my ankle hurts, my knee hurts. So what we'll do is we'll incorporate something into her program where like maybe we're hitting a left side lying right propulsion or a right supine cross connect or something where I'm encouraging her to capture length through this right side, drive the right turn. Okay, cool. Hold that, feel that, hit that for breaths. Now I'm going to go do a single leg skip for height. right? And I want you to feel that same pop up off the ground. Or we're going to
Yep.
do a band accelerated repeated pogo jump. And I need you to not get stuck in the mud on that right side. And so
Mm-hmm.
now we're immediately tying back in. We're creating context. We're capturing a feel, and we're opening their ability to access certain positions that we know are relevant. But then we're going right back into training and saying, now I need you to apply that at force, at speed, in something that is contextually relevant to the task we have to do.
Yeah. I've talked about that for a while. I just call that movement layering, right?
I
So
was going to say, I've stolen that from you for sure. I've seen you do that a lot over the years. It's great.
I use it in my supersets, like in the weight room floor. I use it in my speed and power development. It's like, hey, if you can't achieve this position, why are we just beating our head against a wall, right? We have to create some context. And sometimes that is like I don't want to say anti-gravity, right? But a positional based activity to find and feel the right things. Maybe we're going to use some internal cues. I know that is poo-poo these days, but hey, maybe we're going to do some internal cueing, find and feel some positions, but then hey, that's not the whole workout, right? You have to be able to apply this with force or at speed. So now let's take that and let's layer that into movements that are relevant to your sport. And then all of a sudden, I mean, you watch buy-in go through the roof, right? Because they're like,
Yes.
this was the problem that I had. You
Yes.
identified it, and now you're solving the problem all in one session.
I think it's so important, and I experienced that myself this past week. And I'm always learning through my own training as well, right? Like,
Yep.
and if you continue to train over the years, like your body will change, your perspective will change, your goals will change, and you will continue to learn as you do that. So I highly encourage everyone continue to engage in a process of training on your own,
Yes.
and hire outside coaches as well. Little sidebar: I outsource all my training, my nutrition, everything to outside people at this point. I've done my own programming for many years, but there is great value also in learning from other perspectives and having somebody
Absolutely.
coach you. So, for example, this past week, like working on linear acceleration, been feeling really like kind of stuck getting into
Yeah.
positions, just not feeling the pop that I sometimes have in the past. And working with Mike Camperini as well on my movement end. So shout out
Yeah.
Campo. So working on being able to actually capture a better force application strategy on my right side, not getting
Mm-hmm.
so spun out and shoved forward, actually
Yes.
getting force under my base of support so that I'm not getting shoved down and into that right side all the time.
Yep.
And after working some soft tissue work and some supine cross connects and really feeling like I could let go of tension and apply some pressure to the ground, getting into position and then capturing some actual like hip extension and late IR in my
Yeah.
sprints, so much better in just one day, right?
Yeah.
And the feel was so much cleaner just in that one session. So it's like if you can't get into position, as you said, you're not going to be able to express movement that way. And when you can actually capture a better representation of that and then apply it, it's like, wow, this is completely different. Like I didn't need to
Yeah.
produce more force. I just needed to change the strategy and the access to position that I had to produce the force I needed to, or I was capable of. So yeah,
Yeah.
you'll feel it for sure, and then understand how it can apply, especially to our higher level athletes, right? When we have young kids, because we work as low as 8 years old all the way through professional athletes in the
Yeah.
same group, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we got to meet them where they are. Like there might be one kid who is working on the intricacies of his 60 start and his swing, and there's another kid who I just want to learn to like skip with his with his opposite
Yes.
arm and his opposite leg,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like we tailor everything. The speed and agility work we do is done as a group, and we kind of adjust and meet everybody where they are.
I
But then
love that.
everybody has their own individualized power, strength, and conditioning program after the speed work.
Yep.
And when we do that, that's where I can now dive in a little bit more, or I can keep it superficial and say, hey, we just need to develop a well-rounded athlete who enjoys training, who
Thank
enjoys
you.
physical
Yes.
fitness and wants to do this for the long haul, because when you're 12 or 13, that's what it's about.
Dude, I love that. It's funny. I don't talk about it all that often, but I run like this speed camp every winter, and I've done it for years now. It started for Kendall, although Kendall is kind of on her own now because she's done it long enough and she's going into high school here soon. So I just ran it for all her teammates this year. And look, some of these girls will maybe play high school soccer, maybe not. It's super competitive here. But I was texting with one of the parents yesterday, and I was like, look, man, I can't control soccer. I can't control what's going on the field, but I can tell you she's getting faster, right? She smiles when she's in here. And the parent just said, there's days I think she likes the weight room more than she does soccer. And I said, hey, look, like that's part of this, right? Like I want this to be something they enjoy for life,
Yes.
right? So I want, if I'm going to be their first experience in a weight room or with physical fitness and training, I want that experience to be great.
Totally. One
So
of the
I,
biggest compliments that I had recently came from a parent who one of his athletes trained his one of his son trains with us. A number of the same kids on that team train with us, and he texted me one day and he was just like, "Thank you for all you do with my son, but also just wanted to let you know that like I spend a lot of time sitting in the parking lot outside of the gym. So he'll like drop his son off,
yeah,
he'll work in the car while
yeah,
he's
yeah,
waiting.
sure.
He's like, I see all of these kids coming out of the gym with a huge smile on their face, looking like they feel like they accomplished something.
Yeah,
And that was just such a really cool moment for me because that's what we're trying to create, right?
yes,
Like I love hearing that somebody's 60 is better. I love the hearing somebody, hit a great vertical jump or hit a home run. But you know what? Like if we can take young kids and get them to enjoy and find fulfillment in physical fitness and in terms of moving their body and find enjoyment in that, man, that's the show.
yeah, I love it. I love it. So one of the things that you mentioned, and I feel like we both beaten this drum, this idea of efficiency first, right? Like that's the low hanging fruit, right? You don't always need more outputs, right? And outputs are fun to train. They're easy to measure,
Yep.
right? Oh man, my squat's up, my trap bar's up. But efficiency is kind of the foundation. But we can also probably agree, hey, the weight room plays a role too. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the weight room and maybe how that's shifted or evolved over your time in the industry.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question too, and I think the weight room is absolutely a means to an end, right? And always
Mm-hmm.
has to be appreciated within context, right? What is the ultimate goal of what we're using the weight room for this individual, right?
Yep.
We have to also remember though that as we talked about in terms of the buckets, force production is a key bucket there, right? Mass specific force production is
Yep.
crucial. So if I can't produce a lot of mass specific force, I'm not going to produce a lot of mass specific force quickly, and it doesn't
Yes.
really matter how I orient it because I'm not going anywhere, right?
Right. Right.
So like getting younger athletes or untrained athletes stronger absolutely helps them get better at just about everything, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I also think that the weight room provides an opportunity for us to challenge positional control and ability to produce force under different time constraints, as well as the ability to access full range of motion or full excursion under load, right?
Yeah.
So like it's great if you can lie on the ground and hit a great position, but if as soon as you stand up under load and velocity you can't hold it, it has no importance, right? It's not
Right.
relevant.
Right. Right.
So for me, using the weight room in that regard, both building up the ceiling of force production, building up the ceiling of neural drive and output for our younger athletes or our lesser trained athletes, and then also just appreciating how we can use the weight room to challenge and to control position is huge. And I think as an industry, we're kind of teetering pretty close to the brink of almost swinging the pendulum back in the other direction too hard. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, now the weight room isn't relevant
No,
anymore, and
it's
like
taboo.
it's taboo, right? We can't
Yeah.
lift weights.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think now it's like, hey, like everything matters, but not everything is relevant to everyone, right?
Yeah.
So the weight
Absolutely.
room still has its place. I think a lot of people, if they came in and watched one of our sessions, they would almost be somewhat underwhelmed by the simplicity of what we do, right?
I
It
think
is,
most good gyms are. I
yeah,
think most good gyms really are. So I just want to throw that out there. Now
I
continue.
100% agree with you, and I think that's huge, right? But there's complexity to the concepts that are being applied in a very
Yes.
simple and well executed manner, and
Yes.
that is the key. It's like I chose this exercise, I chose this setup for a very specific reason for this individual, and strength training is a huge contributor. And I'll give you a couple examples. Like we have young kids who came in, and my goodness, Mike, first day I truly thought that they were going to fall through the ground when we started skipping. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, like, is this kid going
Yeah.
to be okay? And we're talking like young 12-year-old kid, a little bit bigger, a little bit like heavier, untrained, right? And I can
Yeah.
I can empathize with that because growing up, I played a lot of sports, but I never trained like this. And I was always a bigger, heavier kid. I was
Yeah.
always finishing last in runs, right? I had some things with that. But now I can see this kid and I'm like, I really hope he sticks with it. Because
Yeah.
what I see is that same kid who on day one I was terrified was going to hurt himself just skipping down the turf. He is now significantly stronger, more coordinated, way faster. His
That's
jumping
cool.
capabilities is unbelievable compared to it. And all we've been doing is training the whole time.
Yeah.
Right. And now you can see, like, he comes in with a smile on his face. He's not as scared anymore. He's not as intimidated by the environment because he knows that he will be met where he is, and he's found fulfillment and progress in what he's doing. So I think we got to appreciate that the weight room is huge there as well. And then on the flip side of that, though, I certainly don't want to take my athlete who's deadlifting 500 pounds and invest a ton of energy and resources into deadlifting 550 if there are bigger rocks, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking of a couple like high level baseball players I've worked with who are strong as oxes, right?
Yeah.
And at a certain point, like when it's already November, season doesn't start till March, and you've already touched over 500 pounds on the trap bar. I'm like, I don't think we need more of this to help you throw the baseball harder or
Yeah,
to help you hit it
exactly.
harder. I think now we need to take that. We need to make sure the whole time that we are monitoring speed KPIs, we're monitoring your range of motion KPIs, and we're monitoring what it looks like with your swing coach or your baseball coach, right?
Yep.
Are we getting the outputs we want where it matters most, or have we stolen something and taken away something that you need, right? And so
Yep.
I'm always monitoring all elements of that bucket in some way, shape, or form, and I'm communicating with the athletes both in and out of the gym at that level to make sure that their needs are being addressed. And then from there, it's like, hey, like, if we push up towards 550, do you really think that's going to help you go from 86 to 90? Right?
Yeah.
Is that really what we need? And in some cases, like we had a kid who was throwing pretty hard, very long, whippy kid, not the strongest kid in the world. Like we did add some muscle to him and we did add
Yep.
some strength. And guess what? He hit 90.
Yeah,
Like he
absolutely. Yeah.
that's what he needed, right? Another kid, once we started removing the heavy strength work, focusing more on strength training, but with a velocity component to it. So putting the gym aware on him,
Yeah.
focusing on high velocity outputs, and then taking our time to really get him controlling his body in a different way, get him managing his center of mass in a different way. All of a sudden now, less elbow pain, less shoulder pain, and increasing velo. So
Yeah.
like that's the context where the weight room is still incredibly relevant. We just have to appreciate how it's going to help support this individual's goals, both short term and long term.
Dude, I love that answer. I love that answer because, like
Appreciate
you
it.
said, you got the skinny elastic kid. Maybe you are using it to crank up some force production. You got the huge, barrel chested gorilla, wide ISA, however you want to think about it, and they're already crazy strong. Hey, man, going, like you said, 500 to 550, is that going to move the needle for you in your performance?
Yep.
And I just had this discussion with a guy yesterday. I mean, if you look at him, he's a basketball player, but he looks like a football player. And I think his brother actually plays in the NFL. I mean, just the genetic
Monster.
lottery. And he's like, yo, dog, like, how much more strength do you think I need? I'm like, zero.
Yeah, none.
Zero. Dog, you need
You're
no
good.
more. But, like, we need to unlock you. We need to get your body feeling good. We need your power, your elasticity to go up. But this is where you always fall back on the 5 buckets, right? If we zoom in, is force production a bucket? Absolutely. Right? But if we zoom out, force production is only 1 bucket.
Yes.
Right? There's 5.
Yes.
And so that's where it's like having that ability, zoom in, zoom out, and what does this athlete need right now? It's going to move the needle for their performance.
And it changes too, right? Like I think we have to appreciate that this is a conversation over time. So
yes.
One athlete last year came back, one of my baseball guys, really good player, was like, I want to get strong coming off the season. They all do it because they lose weight, they lose strength in baseball, and they're like, I want to get strong.
For
Perfect.
Sure.
Let's get strong. So
for sure.
We start off for a couple blocks, build some strength. But we hit a certain point about halfway through the winter where he's like, man, I feel like when I go to pitch, I'm tighter than I want to be. I feel more sore after throwing. And I'm starting to ramp up throwing now. Like I'm not just feeling that whip, that position. And my back's getting sore after I throw a bullpen. And I'm like, hey man, like you're strong. I think it's time that we shift the focus to now, hey, how fast can we move those loads? And more importantly, you're coming 3 times a week. Let's build our 3rd day into more of a capacity day. So now we're going to work on repeated outputs. We're going to do some tempo running, do some tempo intervals. And then we're also going to construct a movement circuit that allows you to work on some of the movement elements we need while encouraging recovery from the additional baseball workload you're doing. And then after about 3 weeks, all of a sudden he's like, I threw a full live bullpen on Sunday. I felt great. I was blowing the ball by guys. I had great control, and I had no back soreness. And it's
Yep.
like, okay, we just had to transition at the right point in time. We had to transition our focus. We had plenty horsepower in the tank.
Yeah.
Now let's go express it, and then I'll be your recovery.
Yep. That's how I think of the off season, right? Or I just think of development as a whole. It's like, especially coming off a long season, a lot of the buckets have kind of, they've got these little holes in it. So you patch the hole, you fill up the bucket, you filled the force production bucket, right? He checked
Yes,
that
sir.
box. He doesn't need to fill it anymore, right? Because then it's just spilling over.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
now it's like, hey, I need to recapture some speed or velocity or mobility. I need to fill up the capacity bucket. That's all smart training is,
Exactly.
but it's also being aware of, hey, I've gotten what I need to out of this physical quality or this bucket. Now it's time to move on.
Such a great analogy, man.
It,
Absolutely.
it, it helps, right? That's how I think too. So one of the things that, okay, first off, when I was going back and looking at your IG, I'm like, has he really not posted a main story or like a main feed post since like 2024? Because I see you all the time, right? And you're always posting the stories. And I know you're always like videoing, right? Which I love. Are you taking that in real time and then showing these athletes, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I need you to change next? Are you doing a lot of that in session?
So it really depends.
Okay.
And I would say it depends on the age, the capability, and the training background of the athlete, right? So there are
Sure.
certain times where I will take those videos and I will not show or reference it to a single athlete in that session because it's
Yep.
not relevant, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to give them simple output-based cues, fundamental elements, and have them focus on one or two things. And that's all I want them to hit because they're young, they're untrained, they just haven't, I don't want to say earned the right, but they don't
I know
need
what you
to
mean.
see those
They just
positions.
need to train. They need
Exactly.
to train.
They just
Yeah.
got to engage in the process and continue to work through it. And I think we're always afraid of things looking sloppy or things
Oh,
looking
sure.
poor. But that's when they're learning, right? So
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
when yesterday we were doing linear excels, had a really young group of kids, couple first day guys, and must have been a million stumbles coming out of our half kneeling starts. And so,
Yeah.
but you know what? Like it wasn't like, oh God, I got to show them what they're doing wrong and I'm going to change the position and do something different. It's like, no, I'm just going to give them opportunities to work through it. Hey, we're not going to
Yes.
stumble next time. Let's move our hands just a little bit faster.
Right.
And all of a sudden it gets a little cleaner. Like they figure it out. So we give them chances to self-organize a better strategy. Now,
Yep.
there are athletes that we work with within the same groups, right, who are relatively elite, right? So they're varsity athletes, they're Division I, they're professional. They've
Yep.
been doing this for a while, and it does benefit them to have an understanding of what context I want to see or what cues I'm looking for or what positions are relevant. So then I will take those videos and here and there I will take select opportunities to say, hey, I want to show you something on your first rep. Did you see how you did this? And then I gave you that cue, right? And you changed your focus. And on the next rep, do you see how that changed the movement? This is what I want it to look like. And I want it to feel like that second rep felt for you. Did you feel how
Yeah.
this happened? And so now I'm correlating something that we're seeing on the video. I'm giving them context as to what efficient and effective movement looks like. And then I'm tying that right back into how did that feel different for you? Were you able to capture that sensation and own that? Because that's what it needs to feel like.
Yeah.
Or, let's say we're doing our base stealing start because we work with a lot of baseball. So that's why I reference that a lot.
Sure.
Like, hey, did you feel how when we moved your feet out wider, right? We got a wider plant angle and we were able to move you more horizontally and you had a little bit more time to actually push and gain ground through each step. Whereas this other one, you kind of got stuck at the beginning. It took you longer to get through that directional step because your feet were more under your body and you had to
Yeah.
shift everything. So I'll show that. And then on top of that, I'll also use it as a debrief. So I kind of take those elements and I end every day by looking back at the videos that I took. So it's like film session for me.
Yeah.
I'll break down the positions. I'll sometimes take screen captures and tie them together. And then I'll use that and send them to the athletes that it's relevant for. I'll say, hey, this is something we're working on. I want you to notice here's this rep. Here's this rep. You did a great job of this on this rep, but here's something we can look to improve. Do you see that? And that way, not only am I taking an opportunity to give them more of an understanding of what efficient and effective movement looks like, because I think that's underappreciated. Like some kids just don't know what we want an
Absolutely.
acceleration to look like. And
Yeah.
once they do, it's actually super valuable for them. They want to know that information. And now they can start to watch their own film and say, hey, like I've noticed I'm not pushing as well here. I'm not striking back as much as I wanted to. Perfect. Let's use that as our cue next time. That's our singular focus next time you're in the gym. Let's keep hitting that. And I think that's super valuable, but it also gives me an opportunity to build a relationship with them, right? I'm building rapport. I'm building a back and forth with them where they know that I'm not just there to work them hard. I'm not just there to coach them up in the live. I'm actually taking the time to review the film and see where the opportunity is for them to get better. Because as you know, like we work in a group setting. So we got up to 10 athletes at a time.
Yeah.
We run multiple groups back to back to back. So I just don't have the ability to dive in with every individual in that group. It's just not realistic. But I can take video as I coach them. And then I can use that to dive into the nuance later if that's relevant to that person. And so that's just been a super useful tool. And then I kind of just started throwing that up on social media as a story for a while because I was doing it every day anyway. And I figure like I like sharing this and I like using it almost like a self-reflection journal at the end of the day to kind of compose my thoughts. So I think it's been useful for my own development, and it's also been really good for the athletes there.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Even if the athletes never watch it, for you as a coach, this was really liberating for me years ago. I know I'm pretty sure you've been influenced by Lee Taft as well.
Yes.
But I remember talking to Lee, and I was just like, dude, you see these things, and it happens so fast. He's like, Mike, I still use video. I'll still go back and watch stuff. And so that for me was like, okay. So it is okay, because I just thought Lee just saw it all in real time, and I'm sure he does.
Yeah,
right?
oh, yeah.
I'm sure he does now. It's like Neo in the Matrix, right? He just sees
the
code.
Numbers going everywhere.
Yes, but I was like, okay. And I remember that entire summer, myself and Joey Burton, he's a basketball skills coach. We were in, this basketball facility. We just called it the trenches, and I just set up the iPad every day, wherever I'm doing my stuff, and I would go every day, and I would watch these guys move, and I'd be like, even if I didn't know how to describe why it was wrong, you start to cultivate and build your own mental model.
Yes.
You start to follow the right people. But I love that idea of watching film as a strength coach, right? Or performance coach. Let's call ourselves performance coaches. I just think that's so valuable because you can't see everything in real time.
Totally.
Especially when you're getting started. And so it just gives you time and it gives you reps. The weight room is slow.
That's
right.
The weight room is right slow. There is huge.
You need reps.
You need reps, and that's like, think of how many more reps you get, right? And it doesn't even involve me just staring at the phone, right?
Yeah.
I can take a video while I'm watching in the live and just follow them, right?
Yes.
And that then gives me more reps to look back on and start to see, what is this individual's movement signature? How do they move well? Maybe it's somebody who moves really well, and when I'm watching it live, I'm like, that doesn't look like it should be fast. Mm-hmm. I remember one athlete specifically, fastest kid in the gym. I remember for the first month I coached him, I was like, Aiden, will you run? Will you try? Yeah. Please try. Right. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, dude, you just don't ever look like you're trying. He's like, really? He's like, I'm running as fast as I can. And his times were the best. And everyone's looking at each other like, how is this kid so fast? And you watch and you just see how his movement signature, he made use of what he had so well. And he produced so much force and projected himself so well. He wasn't going to be like the fast spinner and the switcher, but I learned a lot about the difference between him and some of my other athletes, but I wouldn't have been able to identify that just watching him live for a few reps a day. Now I have video where I can really look back and develop my coaching eye. And I think that's just so huge.
Absolutely. So something you mentioned before I'm interested in, because I feel like the industry is all over the board on this. How often are you timing your athletes?
Yeah, so I time 1 time a week.
Okay.
And I do one thing and one thing only, which is lateral start, 10-yard linear acceleration.
Okay.
So we are, as you can appreciate, we are in North Jersey. It is not particularly nice getting outside until about now, starting to get to the place where we can.
Yep.
But during the winter, when our busiest time is the winter, we are spring sport biased for sure. We work with everybody, but we have more spring sport athletes than anyone else. I mean, than anything else.
Yeah.
And so our busiest time is in the winter. And so we have to find a way to time when we have approximately, I would say, at most, just over 15 yards of turf space.
Yeah.
And if I laid sideways, I'd be pretty close to touching my head and my feet to the width of the turf.
Yeah.
So it is a small space. And
Yeah.
so what I've established with the timing system that we have is the most reproducible thing that we have is a lateral start, 10-yard acceleration. I time it off both sides. We have Fast Friday every week. And so we run that and we use that as a KPI. For my multi-directional speed work, I work all different skills. So as you mentioned, Lee Taft, my model of multi-directional speed is highly influenced by Lee.
For sure.
Anyone who comes to me and is like, where do I learn about multi-directional speed? My first set is go to Lee. Like, just go to Lee right now.
Yeah.
And so I basically have different focuses for each day. So it might be linear one day, lateral change of direction another way, and hip turn retreating on the third day. And then I cycle through those with different main underlying components of each.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I'm developing those things, I'm not necessarily timing a lot outside of that lateral start 10. And then when the weather gets nice, we go outside sometimes on Fridays and we'll do like a flying 10 because we can go just outside the
max
gym.
Velocity, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get our max velocity through about a 20, 25 yard run in, fly 10, give them a few reps, take their best one, and do that like every now and then. But there isn't, for me, when it comes to speed, I am not trying to develop outputs in the gym purely, right?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I want a robust, adaptable mover who's capable of solving movement problems or problems with movement. So for me, I want to overload coordination. I want to challenge your ability to execute a really well executed fundamental hip turn in as many varieties of contexts as possible. I want you to accelerate from as many different positions as you can and still hit good quality positions and be efficient and effective. I want you to be able to change directions off a lateral run, off a shuffle, with different momentums in different spaces and interacting with other athletes and different reactive components. So I would rather develop a robust, adaptable mover by overloading these fundamental principles with different coordinative challenges, because that's what's needed on the field. And as we're going, because they're engaging in this training, they're building the fundamental capacities that support greater outputs, right? They're still running as fast as they can. They're changing directions hard. They're chasing and racing and competing with other athletes, but they're doing so in an environment that actually is engaging and varied and forces them to learn and draw out those stable attractor states. And so I think that's huge. And that's why we only time once a week. And we certainly put a premium on it. Like, we get hyped up, like we get excited when kids are hitting PRs. And we'll do that one time a week. But there's so much more to the development of a holistic multi-directional speed component than just timing, because we know that that's to a degree not what happens on the field. And the further we move towards like timing change of direction elements, the more I think we get towards gaming the test and getting really good at the test and not necessarily being able to execute the movement skills that are relevant to the core. Like, I know you like watching basketball as well as I do. Like, I put up a bunch of clips recently. You watch just a few minutes of March Madness, you will see unbelievable numbers of repositioning actions and all sorts of lateral skills that are not going to be tested well in a 5-10-5.
No.
Like, you are just not going to see that, right?
No.
I would rather put someone in a mirror drill or some sort of reactive game where now they are engaging with different lateral movement to challenge their ability to find a good plant angle, to get out of their cuts and redirect the momentum well, rather than spend a bunch of time lining up and having them go 1-1-1 to test a short change of direction drill.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, so one other thing I want to touch on, and then we'll start to wrap up. I love these movement days that you do and that you post. What prompted those?
Yeah.
And is there a structure to it? Or is it just like, oh, I feel like I'm going to work on some hip turns and I'm going to do some A-skips? Or how have you kind of developed those over the years? Because I think those are really cool. And the other thing is, for me, like, I hate like traditional cardio, right? Like, I'm not the guy that's going to go out and just run for like 30, 40 minutes. So I've been doing more of this, but I would love to hear like your inspiration and how you kind of develop these.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to just prior to the pandemic. And so I am a guy who will run myself into the ground and overtrain myself to the nth degree.
Right.
My background is, as I said, football, Olympic lifting, powerlifting, very compressed, very limited, a lot of movement options. My whole athletic background was root yourself to the floor and push as hard as you possibly can to other human beings, right?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, cool, but my goals are outside of that now, right? I want to
Yeah.
be healthy enough to demonstrate different things for my athletes. I want to feel athletic, and I'm almost 35 now, and I want to be able to do this for a long time.
Yep.
And I want to feel like I can move fast, because what I've found is I'm not as interested in driving up weights in the weight room. I'm not as interested in lifting heavy. I want to be strong and have good body composition, but I enjoy sprinting. I enjoy getting out and doing change of direction work. I
Yeah.
enjoy demonstrating at a decent level for my
Yeah. For
athletes.
sure.
So that stuff's important to me. And I've realized over a long haul, like, in order to do that, I need to keep my movement capabilities within a certain bandwidth. I
Yep.
cannot lose so much access to range of motion that I end up with certain chronic issues that always pop up. So it's always the right knee, it's always the left low back, right?
Yep.
Something is starting to get cranky and aggravated, and I know at that point that I've gone too far.
Yeah.
And so what I started to introduce was, after my like conditioning session. So I'm still doing hard conditioning, still doing like either repeated sprint work, threshold work, cardiac output work, any sort of
Yeah.
thing like that. I'll end with something in the area of 30 to 60 minutes. Again, it depends really on like what I'm training and how much I'm training other than that. But I'll end with 30 to 60 minutes of what I would call like a movement circuit. And I originally took this idea from Joel Jamieson's kind of cardiac output concept,
Yeah. Yep.
but I wanted to incorporate not as much on the aerobic development end for me, because I was already getting plenty of that, but more on incorporating the movement elements that I knew I needed to stay healthy and keep myself on task to accomplish my goals, right? So I started doing that before the pandemic, and then right around the pandemic, I started working with Campo, and he was giving me a lot of activities in my program that were really valuable. But I also found that like I still needed to train on other days, right? I still
Yeah.
needed to
Sure.
like actually drive a stimulus on certain elements, right? I was going to sprint, I was going to lift some weights, all that. So I wanted to incorporate those things that he was giving me on a separate day, because those were not, some of those elements were not necessarily going to drive fitness, right? They were going to drive training adaptations, but I still needed more repetitions with them to get better at them, to capture a
Yes.
feel, right? And to
Yes.
recover from my training. So what I would do is 30, 60 minutes, running clock, throw a podcast on, and I would either go out on my porch, or I'd go into the gym, or whatever I'm doing, and I would incorporate movements somewhere in the area of 6 to 8 movements, and I would have a theme for the day, right? So a general movement theme. And these are the elements where I'm incorporating a lot of variety into my movement. I'm doing a lot of rolling on the ground, so like rolling arm bars. I'm incorporating different skip series. I'm doing chops and lifts. I'm doing like split squat OIs, and I'm doing different lateral movements. I'm doing different kettlebell swing variations. Sometimes I'm playing with the aqua bag, like split squat drops with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
aqua bag. So a lot of different elements that I don't necessarily include on my actual training sessions at this point, but
Yep.
that allow me to continue to get repetitions while recovering from my hard training. So last night's theme, for example, I was working on late IR and hip extension, right? So I was incorporating like a supine cross connect arm bar, some chopping and lifting, a propulsive step up to box, and then into like a split squat OI drop. And I'm going through this at whatever pace I can just maintain a continual output, right? My heart rate's going to be elevated. I'm going to be moving on and off the ground. I'm going to be moving through a variety of shapes and positions, challenging my ability to feel and access certain positions, and doing so in a way that is low intensity and just more expressing movement, expressing
Yeah.
myself in a way that I wouldn't otherwise. Because, as I
Yeah.
said, everything is biased towards high force, compress, squeeze, push harder.
Yeah.
And so now this is kind of like my movement meditation. And it's a really good way to get out of the session feeling better than you came in. And the cool thing about this is I've started to incorporate this now. I mean, now, not started to, I've been doing it for years with my athletes, both distance clients and in person. And the feedback I get is that they always feel incredible after. It's like,
Yeah.
man, that aerobic session or that conditioning session, whatever they call it, is like, man, I feel so good after, right? I feel loose. I feel recovered. I feel like I can move well. And so a lot
Yep.
of people have requested that we keep it in over time, when I just kind of started with it on a flyer.
Yeah.
And so those movement sessions have been really valuable. And I get a lot of good podcast listening done while I'm there, and organize a lot of my thoughts at the end of the day while I'm, moving through space and recapturing some range of motion that I know I need.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love the idea. I've done stuff like that with athletes, and every time I see you doing that, I'm like, I need to make that a bigger priority in my own training. So I
Yeah,
absolutely love it. Okay. Big question time, my friend.
let's do it.
If you could alter the space time continuum and give young Justin Moore one piece of advice, what would it be?
Man, this is always such a good question, and I thought a bunch about it, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you two. So,
Okay.
first
That's cool.
one is gonna be remembering and knowing that everything is going to work out. And
Mm.
I think a lot of times this comes back to the ability to be present in the moment of what we're doing. So
Yep.
often I think we get so wrapped up in what's going to happen next. Is this going to be okay? Am I, coming into the industry? Am I even going to get a job in this industry, like
Yeah.
without a background, right? I remember sitting
Yeah.
at
Sure.
the diner with my dad, and he's like, "Hey, if you don't get a job soon, like you got student loans, you need to get a job in communications, right?" And I'm just like, what am I going to do? And then, I had a job and I was driving 180 miles a day. And like, how long can I do this? What's the next step? Where do I go with
Right.
this? So many situations over the years, both personally and professionally, where I got very wrapped up in that moment and in worrying about the future to the point
Yeah.
where I couldn't necessarily enjoy or revel in what was going on at that moment. And now you
Yes.
look back in retrospect and you're like, man, everything worked out great. And that was actually a great time in my life. And I wish I had embraced that a little bit more and enjoyed that a little bit more. And so I'm
Yes.
always constantly reminding myself, like, yes, we have to be forward thinking. Yes, we have to be goal directed, but know that everything is going to work out as it should. Continue to engage with the process and enjoy and embrace the process as you go. So I
Yep.
think that'd be
Love it.
one. And then number two is training. There is so much more to life than training, and there is so much more to training than mashing yourself into the ground all the time, right?
Yes.
And I think that's huge, and I've learned that lesson multiple times now in different regards. Sometimes orthopedically, recently it's been health wise, and just understanding that having a certain level of balance, appreciating the perspective of where everything fits in, and
Yes.
again being able to zoom out and see all the different buckets, both of training and in life. I would give myself that piece of advice to look at things a little bit more holistically and not get so wrapped up in chasing numbers or thinking I have to train myself into the ground all the time,
Right.
things like that.
I love it, man. That's great advice. Great advice. Okay, so last but not least, we've got our lightning round. I got actually 5 questions for you.
Let's do it.
But number one, you seem like you're traveling. Like you like to travel. What's the favorite trip you've been on here lately?
Cool. So yeah, my wife and I love to travel. We've been traveling since the first year we met, and that was actually a big part of like what we knew was going to bring us together.
Yeah.
I would say I got two for you again. One would be Finland recently.
Okay.
Awesome trip, absolutely incredible. Finland is a gorgeous place. We went right before Christmas, and it was a really cool experience. Finland's an awesome place. But then if I had to pick all time, and I always come back to this one, I think Iceland was
Hmm.
my favorite trip we've ever taken. It was, I think, still the first year that we were dating. We went to Iceland for a long weekend, literally just drove the entire southern coast and
Oh, that's
visited
cool.
Reykjavik and Glacier Lagoon. And I think part of it is Iceland is such a spectacular place physically, but it was like when she first told me, she's like, "Yeah, let's go to Iceland." I'm like, "What is there to do in like we're going
Right,
to
right, right.
Iceland?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, let's go to Iceland." I'm just going along for the ride, and it far exceeded all expectations. It was
Hmm.
incredible. I highly recommend if anybody's listening to this and you get a chance to go visit Iceland, it is an unbelievable place to go. So those would be my two.
I love it. I love it. Okay, number two, you mentioned coffee. What's the go-to? Are you like an espresso guy, a drip guy? Like, what is the go-to beverage then?
So we have an espresso machine. It's my favorite thing. Actually, just finished a cup. I
Yeah.
love their chocolate Nespresso coffee from the
Okay.
Nespresso company is incredible. Just a
Okay.
little hint of chocolate. I take it black, no sugar, no milk. I love the taste of coffee,
Like
and I
straight
like
espresso shot?
no. So it's like it's Nespresso, right? So
Oh,
it's
okay,
like
okay, okay.
coffee, but it's darker, right? It's a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
heavier.
sure.
I like the bitter, and I love
Yes.
just the flavor of coffee. So having that with like my morning shake and my little like morning routine, it's a great way to start my day.
I love it. Okay, number three. Dude, when are you going to give up the goods on these desserts? For real. I've been asking you about this for a while now, man.
So I
need
did
the
promise
desserts.
you. I promised you. I told you that I would. So I want a quick disclaimer. I will absolutely share the ingredients to this dessert. I need everybody to know though, because everyone gets a Ninja Creamy, I think, thinking like I'm going to have high protein, low calorie, low carb, right? These are not that like what I'm posting on Sunday night.
Yeah.
My current diet, my current macros keeps a lot of room to have some high carb, high fat, and high calorie treats in there.
Yeah.
So this is about like half the calories of a Ben and Jerry's pint, but like the quality of the ingredients is 10 times greater.
Yeah, sure.
But again,
sure.
if you're like trying to lose weight and keep your calories low, this isn't for you.
This ain't it.
This ain't it. So the base is banana. So we use
Okay.
like 220 grams of banana, I think. We use almond milk then to create basically the blend. So like the banana goes right in the cup, break that up, and then I take a Ninja bullet and I put the almond milk, a small scoop of, I use bone broth protein, chocolate.
Okay.
From there, I'll put peanut butter, cacada. So cacada is the outlier that people don't know about. Small
Okay.
company. It is basically like this super sweet, delicious coconut peanut buttery kind of spread.
Okay.
It's literally only got like 3 ingredients in it. So it's coconut and it's syrup from the coconut and it's some sort of seaweed extract.
Okay.
Organic, super healthy. Incredible though. A little bit of cacada, raw cocoa powder, some honey, and I think there's one other thing I'm missing off the top of my head. But anyway, blend that guy up, right?
Yep.
Pour that over the banana in the Ninja Creamy container. Stuff that guy in the freezer overnight.
Okay.
Take it out, put it in the Ninja Creamy, spin it up, add mix-ins of your choosing. My choice is peanut butter cups, Justin's Organic Peanut Butter Cups, literally the brand Justin's.
Yeah.
And then the like a couple pieces of cookie dough that you can get from like little cookie dough bites.
Yeah.
Put those in as your mix-ins, and
Yum.
then it is honestly, I completely forget about real ice cream. Like I do not crave real ice cream because that thing is so incredible. I look forward to it every Sunday night that I have it, and I sit there, watch a show with my wife. It's the best. So if anybody's looking for that, reach out to me. I'll send it to you. Again, just disclaimer though, it is not low cal, low carb.
Hey man, it doesn't always have to be like that, right?
Exactly.
Like sometimes you tailor the rest of the days and the eating and the nutrition to, hey man, I'm going to enjoy this
100%.
drink or I'm going to enjoy this dessert. Nothing wrong with that.
100%.
Okay. Last but not least, dude, what's next, man? I mean, what's next for Justin Moore? What are you working on? Excited about? Anything?
Yeah, so this was an interesting question actually. So right now I'm really focused on identifying and developing all aspects of my, I would say, health and wellness overall first and foremost. Went through some stuff health-wise last year, but really what it comes down to right now is identifying where there are opportunities for me to grow in a lot of different avenues. So I'm really focused on my nutrition right now. I've overhauled my nutrition in the last year. I outsourced that to Aaron Davis and Brie Larson from what used to be Train, Adapt, Evolve, now Carbon. Shout out those guys. They're the best. I'm really focused on things like sleep, on stress management, on meditation, getting myself into a better mental space and being able to cope with stress on a daily basis. I'm revitalizing or looking at training in a different way. Again, trying to grow my perspective on where that fits in. I'm working on being a better husband, and I'm working on making sure that I'm able to be present when I need to be able to. And then that parlays into being a better teacher, right? Being a better coach, because one of my roles is director of education and coaching development at Bolt. So I'm improving my ability to distill complex concepts into young coaches, to ask better questions to help develop young coaches. And I feel like I'm making progress there because, as you mentioned earlier, like I'm somebody who likes to talk a lot. I like to share information. And I've been given feedback sometimes, even from my own wife, and she's the best for doing this. Like, hey, you give too much. You try to give too much. It's overwhelming, right? Less is more. Hit your points, be succinct. And so I'm really developing myself in that way as well. And then I'm trying to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our sports performance program so that I can speak to more athletes, so that I can work and help more athletes, and so that we can improve the quality of the experience for everybody who comes through our doors. And so I think that's really what I've been focused on, both personally and professionally, in the last year. And then longer term and kind of going forward, now that I'm in a different headspace and a better headspace, I think I want to get back to writing more. So you pointed out like I haven't posted too much on like my actual Instagram. And I've just kind of stepped back from that for a little while. And I feel like I'm getting to a point where right now I have some things that I want to talk about, things that I want to express. And so I want to get back to doing that more. And I'm also looking to potentially create a couple products going forward that would
Cool.
speak to sharing some of what I do and sharing some of my thoughts in my model. And a number of people have asked me, like, hey, when are you going to come out with a video or series? And I'm like, yeah, we'll get to that. But now I think we're getting to the point where it's time to pull the trigger on that. So that's something I'm looking to start doing very soon.
I love it, man. Well, Justin, this has been amazing. Like, such a great show. You shared a ton, but it was all super valuable and super relevant. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great work that you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you again, Mike. Really appreciate you having me on. And so they can find me at JMSB_strength training. My primary avenue for sharing all this information is Instagram. As you said, I don't post necessarily as much on like my full profile, but if you follow me,
Stories.
I post every day on those stories.
Yeah.
I share resources, I share clips of videos, and I share what we do in the gym. So I look at social media as like, hey, here's what I do. Here's what I think. I hope you can take some value from that and we can share some ideas. But that's really how I approach it. So if they want to follow me or reach out, they can do so there. That's really where I primarily spend most of my time sharing information.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'll make sure I get the profile in the show notes. So if you're not following Justin, please do that. He's a really great coach, shares amazing stuff, and I know you'll benefit from it. So Justin, man, again, thank you so much for coming on, brother. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you again for having me.